A nice feature of Regex Concord is that you can, before you do a large search over a corpus that's very huge, such as a corpus that may have something like 1,000 different text files in it, you can check out your search pattern to see if it's really a viable search pattern, whether it's coming up with anything good or not. And that's done by putting in a search here, or an item to search for, or items, and then hitting the sample button. So for instance, I want to look for all instances of the words either un or una in this mini corpus that I have, and those are both definite articles. So you'll learn a little bit later on that that's a way of searching for either the word un or una. And before I do a search over this corpus as a whole, I can get a sample to see if that's coming up with anything good. And it is. And you'll see in your sample that you'll have the word that was found. There's an instance of un, but there's an instance of una. And in the sample, it tells you what file that instance of un came from. And you'll notice here too that it has the previous words and the words coming after the word un in the document, wherever that word was. Now remember, the number of words that are here and here are going to be determined by setting your search preferences. And we had 10 right there. If I were to change that to 5, I'd get 5 on either side of those words. Notice how it's getting smaller. But this is a good way of seeing whether your search pattern is a viable one. I notice here that I'm getting a good number of instances of un, and I'm getting a couple of unas. Now, there's one other thing to say about your sampling. If you look at the sampling preferences dialog, here you can do a number of things. If you have a very large corpus, such as with 1,000 texts, you could click this checkbox right there, and it would search through or sample a random sample of those 1,000. So you would need to just change that number there to whatever you want. So let's say you wanted to look through a random sample of 40 files of this corpus that presumably has 1,000 files in it. Then it will come up with a random 40 files. So it's a way of establishing a sampling technique. And if you want to say how many instances of your search you want to grab from each of those 40 files, then you could write that in the second dialog box there, matches per file. But if you wanted to get every single instance of your search pattern within those 40, then as the directions here describe, if you put in a -1, that will say give me 40 files at random from the corpus that I selected, but get me every single instance of my search pattern.